James, Razika, are you wearing a clown costume at the popcorn counter?
Andres Lorente, yes, I am. You know what it's like when it's laundry day.
Oh.
And all your good clothes are in the wash. But you've got to go out and do a podcast.
Yeah.
And this was the most available costume.
Oh.
I mean, it didn't seem to make any sense to wear just the shoes and the pants without putting on all the rest.
You went full clown.
I did, and the wig will protect me from UV radiation when I leave later on.
It's better than what I would do, because laundry day is nude day for me. I just take off all my clothes and walk around. I've come to the popcorn counter nude before.
You have come to the popcorn counter nude before, right. I'm amazed they let us back in after.
You can tell that it's not laundry day for me, just for you today.
It's interesting. They didn't want you to work behind the counter at the popcorn counter when you were nude, though. They are prepared to draw the line somewhere. Well, so just glancing at myself in the mirror in the washroom earlier on reminded me. Here's my question for the week. What is the difference between comedy and horror?
I sort of know the answer to this question because I've heard this phrase with movies a lot, but if they say it, what's the difference between tragedy and comedy? And what do they say? Time, or like time. 2 weeks or 2 years or something like that. Yeah, time. So I guess that's the difference, but maybe you're onto something different, because I was saying tragedy, not horror. Horror is a different thing.
I think I've noticed a trend here. I'm always big on the trends.
Yeah.
As you can tell from the way I dress. Big on trends.
Yes.
And I so many horror directors now come from comedy, I think. So Zach Cregger, who we were talking about last week, so his origins are with like comedy troupe, Whitest Kids You Know, sketch comedy. Sketch comedy is still on YouTube now that you can watch. Yep. And he has stepped from comedy directly into making horror. Although, both times, both of his features are horror with a little dose of comedy. Yeah. In Barbarian, there are a couple of really hilarious gags. Actually, I was watching Barbarian on the sofa, and my son was commenting that it must be good because I was laughing my head off and then gasping the next minute. So, comedy and horror hand in hand. Yeah. The other big horror director that everybody thinks of first now. It's Jordan Peele. Yeah, who kind of started out in improv. He was in kind of like Second City or whatever, in Mad TV. Yeah. And then now that he's making feature films, these are films which are basically horrors. And then I've tried other people who have spanned both camps, like Sam Raimi. Oh yeah, who does that kind of slapsticky sort of horror, isn't it? Evil Dead, Army of Darkness. Yeah. Even Spider-Man, it's kind of, there are elements of horror, but there's elements of slapstick. The two live side by side. And the other one is John Krasinski. Because, who would have thought that guy from The Office would then go on and make A Quiet Place?
Quiet Place, that's it, yeah.
So my personal answer to the question, what's the difference between comedy and horror, is, well, nothing. It's kind of the same thing, I think. But am I a million miles away from the truth?
When I go to a horror film, I feel scared. When I go to a comedy, I laugh.
But those are just reactions.
Those are just,
I mean, I dislike jump scares.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I know anybody who does like jump scares. And yet every horror film seems to have them in. But the natural reaction after a jump scare is to laugh, isn't it? And I think you see this when you go and see a horror movie in a packed cinema. Yeah. When you get a jump scare, everyone leaps out of their chair. But then you get a little ripple of laughter 2 seconds after that, where people are laughing at, not just laughing at the fact that it's that they have responded so obviously, but they're also laughing at the fact that they were scared of something which turned out not to be scary.
Yes, and that everyone else was scared by it too.
Yeah,
I guess it's a release, and if you're in a theater, it's this sort of communal release. So. It's nervous laughter, isn't it? It's a different kind of comedy. I heard a podcast recently with Ben Stiller, who doesn't really I don't think he's really done a proper horror film, but obviously known as a comic actor and a comic director now as well, and obviously a dramatic director as well. But I think it was on Mark Maron's podcast, so they were talking about the dearth of comedies right now. Like, studios don't really want to make a lot of comedies because they're afraid that they won't hit, and that they seem to be fewer and farther between. But at the same time, if I look at my local theater's listings, it's horror. So it's almost like it's displaced comedy a little bit. And I think from a financial perspective, these are cheaper forms of film to make. Horror films are, classic sort of, they can be very low budget. You don't necessarily have to have big name actors for the genre. And comedy works on a similar level. I mean, in part because it's generally less visual, I guess. You do see some visual comedy, but there's a lot more dialogue going on. And so this is, if the writing is strong, it's going to hit and it's going to be profitable without, building massive sets necessarily, or having these big set pieces, or like a big dramatic actor in a lead role to draw the audiences. So they're both kind of cheaper to make, and I think that's a draw, and that's kind of a way that they are similar.
Comedy has this problem that it doesn't travel nearly so well.
That's true too. Yeah. It's not as universal.
So comedy is more peculiarly cultural, whereas horror is more universal.
And I might say that it probably travels better the more universal it is. When you think of Charlie Chaplin, in the early days of purely visual cinema, I think, you could watch that anywhere in the world and people would at least understand it, right? Whereas if you have a lot of cultural references from one country that don't really work in another country, you're talking about famous people in one place that, aren't as famous somewhere else. And if it's wordy, you have to be able to understand the language a little bit better. And if for comedy, and, when you're translating films, the language might not carry the comedy the same way images would. So horror also probably travels quite well. So there's a difference there. Huh?
Yep. And I guess, everybody around the world is frightened of the same sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody's puns are different.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
But that does kind of lead me to like another parallel. Takeshi Kitano.
Oh, yeah.
So he's known as a director and star of broadly very violent movies in the West.
Yeah.
But in Japan, he's a comedian.
Yeah.
So he's known as like a crazy comic guy on TV.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't seem at all threatening or frightening to a Japanese audience. But traditionally, Japanese humor doesn't really travel in the same way that German humor doesn't really travel. Indian humor doesn't really travel. That humor in general is much more localized. And now the film business, I suppose, is relying on international receipts much more heavily than domestic receipts.
Yeah.
It's very important that you put your money into projects that will travel abroad. Mr. Bean, I don't know, have you had that in America, Mr. Bean?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, I think Mr. Bean was made with the intention of it being deliberately international.
Yeah.
I remember talking to a guy who made Dip Dap, which is a British animated program for children, which features absolutely no dialogue, which is just like the little 5-minute comedies about a man who is made out of just a line. He's like a very simple drawing, and he has these very simple kind of drawing adventures. And he was saying again, they made it largely with the intention of it being sold internationally because there is no dialogue. Very few cultural reference points. They keep it super, super simple so that it can be understood by people everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that's one of your primary drivers, I suppose, for getting international receipts. But there's something else about comedy and horror, I think, which is that, and I think you've sort of touched on it, which is they're sort of both about, I think they're both about timing. The timing of gags. Yeah. Is essential, but the timing of scares is also essential. I mean, just watching Weapons last week. Sorry, the number of times that the camera would just linger on a door and draw out like the moment until you suddenly get a shock, or you cut away to something, or someone comes out of the door, or you're anticipating someone coming out of the door, or there are just noises on the soundtrack, or it's all about the way that is timed and the way that teases you. That is the way that it works. So for both of them, timing is more essential, I think, than it is for drama. Yeah,
this is a good point. Well, I think we talk about writing a lot, and I think I've heard this rule about on the page, you're supposed to have one either one, if you're doing comedy, there should be either one joke, one gag, or one visual piece that's funny on every page. So you're looking at 90 or, minimum, right? 90 to 120 are those in a script, or similarly in horror, there should be either something that's just eerie or some look that's scary, or one surprise on each page as well. So, I mean, they do follow those rules, and I think timing, we talked about timing a little bit last week when we were talking about the lack of good timing in City of Lost Children. But timing is super important, and I think it can or should come from the writing, and then it has to be sort of visualized by the director onto the screen. But it should be regular, and some of them are going to hit and some of them are going to miss, but if you hit it 50% of the time, you've got 50 frights or 50 laughs in your film, right?
Yep. It feels somehow instinctively like horror and comedy work on the same bits of the brain, I think. Because they're both sort of, I think the human brain is in part a pattern recognition machine. And when your expectations are subverted, that is what kind of like disturbs you as a viewer, I think. And horror and comedy both work on subverting your expectations, don't they? When it's comedy, something you didn't expect happens and it's funny. If it's horror, it's something you didn't expect happens and it's scary.
Yes.
Whereas, for drama, you don't have to have something that you didn't expect to happen. It's kind of fine for the story to present you with the things which you feel are inevitably going to happen, because it's the way that it happens and the characters that it happens to that forms the story. Mm-hmm. Whereas for horror and comedy, it's all about setting up expectations and then surprising you with a different outcome.
Yeah.
So you have a different punchline, or somebody different appears through the door, and either it's something non-threatening, in which case you laugh, or it's something which is threatening and then you scream.
Yeah.
But it's kind of relying on that same neurological mechanism. I say that as if I know anything about neurology. I really don't, but it feels to me like they work the same way.
I think you're a doctor, and I think you put drugs into people's brains that they have different thoughts and stuff. So I think you're a psychologist too. Yeah. I mean, I would wager that. Oh my God! I just lost. Did you drug me? I just lost my idea. Oh my lord. Oh my lord. No, I would wager that like the rules around setup and payoffs in both of those are much more costly, I guess, than in drama. Like just comedy is all about, like, if it's a verbal gag, you've got to set it up and pay it off, eventually or quickly. You can do it a lot in the course of the film. The same thing is, I think, true in horror, is that you're doing a lot more setups and payoffs than you would in drama. Drama is more about really getting into the characters and seeing the story play out. And yes, if the gun appears in the first act, it's going to fire later in the film, the third act or whatever. But I think both horror and comedy, from the writing perspective, again, it's just this constant system of setups and payoffs. And some of them will hit, some of them have to hit, otherwise you don't really have something that's either scary or funny. But I guess I think one thing that worries me is I've seen these like genre jams of funny horrors, and the tone is so difficult. So when you're combining the two, I think that's a real art form, and I think it probably fails more often than it succeeds, because you've got to get the tone serious on. You have to take your comedy seriously, but you have to get the tone right on both the horror elements and the comic elements. And I think it's hard. I'll try and think of something that I think really does well on that. But
I can think of a comedy horror which I think is a bit of a masterpiece of tone, although we ended up bypassing it for the pod, which was Megan. So we were going to watch Megan and Megan 2, and it's kind of slightly got out of hand, but I did get to go and see Megan 2, and we rewatched the original Megan in preparation as well, and I think both of those films really handled tone very, very cleverly.
Nice.
They are kind of black comedies. They are very comic, but they are also kind of 15 certificate modern horror, techno horror films. And I think there is like a vector I imagine there's like story space
with
a vector that you can draw through it, where it is like it's 45% horror, but it's also like 45% comedy, and it's sort of 40% science fiction, and it's kind of 20% sort of parental drama, and you draw this very fine line between all those different genres. And I think Megan and Megan 2 really skillfully navigate that particular vector. So I think it's really clever how it manages to give you a bit of a start and yet also make you laugh, and it maintains that tone really consistently throughout. I think a little miniature miracle, actually. I really enjoyed Megan and Megan 2. They are schlocky and kind of silly and campy and joyful and a bit scary, and I really laughed out loud. And I think, a proper little victory.
Yeah, nice. I was going to say, I think Delicatessen, which brought us to City of Lost Children, I think that is a fantastic comedy, but also it has the right horror elements as well. It's all about cannibalism ultimately, so it's and an enclosed space too. Like, you can't get away from the bad guys, and so I think that actually really does well also. But there probably aren't that many by percentage of truly quality. What would you call that? Horror comedies, horror,
comedy horror. I think.
Horror, dark. It's essentially a dark comedy, which is it's a genre I love, and I try to write that stuff. It's kind of my favorite stuff, but I think it's hard.
It's hard,
and then getting it on the screen is pretty difficult too. And then you run into these later problems of how do you market it? How are you going to find the audience with this thing? Like Weapons, for example, which I didn't think was very funny. It had a couple, certainly funny moments, I guess, but for me, that via the trailers and what I'd heard about it, I thought that was just a straight horror film. I think it can make it probably difficult to market something like that as well. There's one film that I wanted to look up quickly. I think it was called Cherry Falls. And the reason it came to me, I saw it on BBC Two in the middle of the night when I was writing my kind of dark comedy film. 1999, Cherry Falls. This film is a horror film that's supposed to be funny, and it scared me because I saw myself writing something that I wanted to be both comic and horror, and seeing, oh my God, is my film going to end up like Cherry Falls? Directed by Jeffrey Wright, written by Ken Selden, Brittany Murphy. One of her films.
Jeffrey Wright, the same Jeffrey Wright.
I don't know. Jay Moore was in it. Michael Biehn. Is it the same Jeffrey Wright? It looks like a different Jeffrey Wright.
Oh.
It is a different Jeffrey Wright. Yeah. But Australian, all the same. Maybe it is. I don't know. The picture looks odd. No, that's not Jeffrey. That's not the Jeffrey Wright. That's a Jeffrey Wright. Anyway, this thing, Cherry Falls, just scared me, but not because it was a horror film. It scared me because it made me question my own writing of dark comedy, because I thought, oh God, my film's going to be a bomb. You can't put these two genres together.
Nothing scarier than spending all your energy and time on a project, and then just as you put the finishing touches to it, seeing the same project appear on TV.
Exactly.
It was made 3 years ago, and you think, oh.
Sobering. It's very sobering. That's why I'm going to be horror sober. No, I'm going to be comedy sober. Did we talk about that on this episode, or was that?
Was that last week? That might have been last week. You are still comedy sober.
It all runs together. Comedy, horror, sober, sobering.
So what you're trying to tell me is you like the outfit.
I love it. I think you should do the clown thing more often, and I promise never to combination to the popcorn king ever.
Now that sounds like a deal. Yep.